Hello, folks. It's George Leoniak, and welcome to New Geometry. Today, I'm going to share a video related to the flower of life and a little bit about the double circle ring around the diagram. Drunvalo Melchizedek talks about that as being related to the cell membrane thickness of the egg, the Zona Pellucida. So we're going to discuss that a little bit, and we're going to show some other relationships to the golden ratio there, as well as getting into the platonic solids from the flower of life. So we're going to do some neat diagrams and show some new diagrams. So let me start up the presentation here, and we'll start working our way through this. All right, so of course, the Drunvalo Melchizedek book, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, in the book, he describes a few times what this outer ring and the importance of the outer ring in this diagram was that he discovered on his trail of discovery. And he refers to this as it's the Zona Pellucida. That's what he describes the double ring as. And it's found around the egg, the mammal egg, the oocyte. And the diagram that he shows in the book is derived from this. I've done a recreation of it here, of kind of finding the distance between the red and blue circles here is according to him, the Zona Pellucida measurement. Now, the Zona Pellucida measurement can be a variety of different sizes for different types of animals, but I've come back to this mystery a number of times whenever I come up with the circle that fits around the flower of life kind of organically in my process. So recently this happened, so I took a look at it, and I really wanted to get down to the bottom of it and discover if this is true, that ring around the flower of life based on that square view diagram that I just showed you. Well, it doesn't appear to be true for a human egg. Like I said, there's a lot of variety among species and stage of development that the egg is taken from. This picture here on the left here is from this article written here, and it's giving you the measurements, but the Zona Pellucida measurement here is the length, this distance B, and this is the inner portion of it. And you can see some other measurements, variety of different types of measurements according to the different surveys. These could be different animals. I know this one's a human one. I believe this is human as well. But that distance for the outer Zona Pellucida, just from eyeballing it like this, is really quite different than what we are seeing within this diagram. So I'm curious about that. I'm not sure how he came up with this. I know he tried to base this outer ring measurement and making the connections to the flower of life etchings that are on the temple of Abydos, temple of Osiris and Abydos. That inscription on the stone there has, sort of this proportion. I mean, I'm going to jump ahead. I didn't think I'd get to this, but I wasn't even going to use these slides. But let me just show some of the overlays that I did on this way back as I got that temple of Osiris picture and laid the outline of the rings on there. So there's a slight difference in the rings of the blue, and the larger ring of the etching is just a little bit bigger. But I know he tried to, it seemed like he was trying to correlate the design to the flower of life, the outer ring measurement there. However, from what what I'm discovering here as I look at the measurements and do the drawings, that there's really quite a bit of difference between the actuality of the Zona Pellucida and the around the egg, or of the egg, that is really quite different than deciphering it through this drawing here. Okay, so I just was like, well, let's take a shot at this and just see if the golden ratio or something with the golden circles may come somewhere close. So I did a kind of classic golden ratio construction, easily done with a Vesica Pisces, and getting this purple circle here. And it's going to give you the start of a series of golden ratio circles. I've got one smaller one in the middle, but basically I've put that on the outer side of the original Vesica. That's giving me a kind of distance between the inner red to the outer blue here, and that's the width of a golden ratio progression circle. So if this were, let's say, a 1-inch radius, this next circle here would be phi, and this would be phi squared. So I don't know. I just tried putting that on the end because I was like, let's explore this because this is really different than what I'm seeing. And what do you know? I laid it right over top of the image from that article that I showed you prior, and it came up to be very, I don't know, pretty dead on. It looks like a pretty nice match to me. So here's the blue and the red. And the Zona Pellucida measurement here is the B. This is part of the diagram. It's this light circle here is also going around. But this whole area, I guess, from the, I don't know, maybe it's ooplasm or something like there in the middle. I'm not sure of all the definitions of the terminology here. But that combined distance compared to the lighter gray area out here and to the darker on the inside, it really fit well. Not making any gigantic claims out of it, but it was cool to see that the golden ratio, as we know, very much related to life in general, is also related to, kind of somewhat related to the proportions that I'm seeing here at the foundations of life. It's just a drastically different diagram than what we're seeing over here in terms of that distance, which wasn't really constructed by golden ratio, had more to do with the edge length here of 1/4 the edge length of this small segment here of and the inner circle between the 4 circles and how he discovered it, those 2 circles. So I decided to just call up another few images on the internet just to see if it wasn't a one-off situation. These are a couple other eggs pictures that I found. And as I laid the image over, you could see a little bit darker gray than the surrounding area. And the blue circles are fitting around, and the red circle centered on the center point, still with the same golden proportion ratios that I was showed previously in the construction diagram. So it may not be accurate all the time. You can see there's some space up here. This doesn't look like it's perfectly centered inner portion of that egg. But, this lower portion does have a nice match there. So it is kind of just layering and diagramming over something that's totally organic of just straight lines and circles. And I'm pretty pleased with that. And it's way closer than what's in the ancient secret diagram that Drunvalo shared in the previous drawing. So I'd love to hear more about that. How this relates, or maybe there's some other, maybe it's a mouse egg or something, but I think the mouse egg is even a little bit bigger. All right, so anyway, that's just to kind of get started, but now that I got that kind of cleared up of that little piece, I wanted to explore, and this is really why I went back to look at the outer ring of Drunvalo's diagram here in the book, because I came up with this construction here that was going to lead us to some very, very cool discoveries here in just a moment, because we're going to switch gears from the egg and the Zona Pellucida into how the platonic solids and other forms are going to be all discovered, the golden ratio of forms in particular, when we have an outer ring around the traditional layout of the 19 circles of the flower of life. We have this outer ring here, the outer circle, having a radius of the square root of 5 plus 1. So that's 3.236. Now, if you divide the square root of 5 plus 1 in half, of course, that will give you 1.618 phi, the golden ratio. So really this little distance that we're looking at here from the flower of life's top circle to the extension beyond it, the distance there is really just 0.236, okay? Because it's 3 inches from A to V here, that's to the black circle, and then just 2.36 more. And I said, well, geez, maybe that's what Drunvalo had in his measurement, but it turned out not to be. So then I went back and looked at the Zona Pellucida and kind of came up with that other circle construction. Now, this circle construction I'm showing you here is not related to the Zona Pellucida. It's not this diagram. I mean, I could draw it from this, but it's not meant to be this. So we're kind of not taking this diagram and saying it's that egg anymore. But we are going to explore this now because I think that this is a very cool measurement that goes beyond just that 2.36 beyond the flower of life. And what goes on here, one of the earlier discoveries within it was just straight from the flower of life, going to that larger ring on the outside, the darker black one, and the lighter black one's the 3 mark. That's the 3-inch radius, and 3.236 is beyond it. Well, that will extend just regularly if we're just creating from the central flower of life points, like from the central hexagon or making a star, basically, extend it past out to that larger ring. That's going to give you the points around that new circle, the larger circumference circle, or the larger radius circle, that's going to give you the perfect place to go ahead and create the decagon around it. So these are circles of are actually 2 inches in radius. They're the same size circle as the center circle here. And we'll take those circles and then we can go from those points, those anchor points out here. We can make a circle, which will give us this point, and to make a circle from the vertical line, which is going to give us this point. And if you do that all the way around, or at least just pick up those points, it will give you a perfect decagon. Now, I drew this a couple times, and the accuracy isn't as good as I've done with other methods, but at least in a 100% digital version, it's 100% right on. When you get into hand-drawn, I probably prefer a lot of other methods, but it was kind of cool that the kind of a whole version of the flower of life was included in this giant decagon, but it was really due to the proper radius circle, 3.236, or not proper, but a circle that will give you the possibility to create that decagon at the correct stopping point. So here it is again, and this time I'm going to add some lines, basically from what is normally given to you in the flower of life construction. Okay, so if you just drew the flower of life and you just started making the hexagons and creating the different stars that are possible in here, normally we stop all these, it's just right at the node points. But because I have this larger 3.236, the square root of 5 plus 1 radius circle around this whole thing, well, that gives me a new stopping point. So what I did was I just extended these little lines just enough past to meet at that larger hexagon there, rather than just stopping them at the node points. And that's where I always find the magic to be within working with anything golden ratio. It's always going to be just a little bit beyond what is the obvious stopping point. And it just kind of stretches your awareness to see beyond the obvious edge. So that's what happened here. And amazing things happen because when I do that and I go to that large outer hexagon now, which is just outside of the flower of life, it's like the flower of life circles are all contained within that. Now, I haven't mentioned, of course, how I got this circle, the larger circle, but let me just back up before we go here. That's easily shown right here in this diagram, okay? Boom, 1 point there, down to there, swing up, then you've got your construction and you've got that circle and you're ready to go into expanding the flower of life out to make the icosahedron, dodecahedron, icosahedron, rhombic trichontahedron, and I could do them at another tier down in here. So I've got some fractality within the phi ratio forms. I'm not going to show all those drawings, but you have perfectly proportioned golden ratio forms right out of the flower of life. And it really is more to do with just one special circle that did that, and that is root 5 plus 1 radius. Okay, if you start with the unit 1 circle and you go 1, this is 2, 3, just 0.236 more, and all of a sudden you are you're rocking with the golden ratio at that point. And you can do anything that I've shown, most things I've shown with the golden seed of life, just from that in the flower of life. So this is one of, I've done a few different ones in the flower of life to show some construction ways to get the golden ratio working and flowing with that circle pattern of 19 circles. You're still going to get the same golden ratio circles. So if I did just start to fill in the circle pattern as I've shown in the golden seed of life videos, and you extend that out to the flower of life, you're going to be matching up at the same points. It's like you really can't get out of that when you're working with these golden ratio pattern forms. They're always going to have the golden circles in there. So anyway, rhombic trichontahedron, remember, that is a compound of these two forms, dodeca and icosa. If you cross the edges of these two forms, they're going to make these diamond faces, right? And the diamond faces at the center of each of those vertices, at the center of each of those faces, you'll create new vertices, and those vertices create the icosahedron. So you could picture right here easily a triangle. And the cool thing about this diagram is that it puts the triangle right on the original seed of life or flower of life circle here. And a lot of the proportions fall, and here's the hexagon, right? That hexagon, which is the trichontahedron, is actually on the main nodes there. But you have to extend a little bit beyond, because you can't get a trichontahedron on the original stopping points of the flower of life. That's why the little 0.236 extension does a lot to the diagram. It looks like I forgot to put some text on this slide, but we're going to talk about this form on the right here quite a bit in a little bit as we get further into this, especially towards the end. So we're going to come back and revisit this form, and I'll describe a lot more about it. But it was really one of the forms that led me to this circle pattern. So in my process of discovering it, you can view it right now as like a truncated icosahedron. I'll give it a more specific name, but you can see these pentagon faces would be trimmed off. But it's also kind of got this golden rectangle face here, which would be in your square view orientation. These would be golden rectangles. Well, this form is really if you basically truncate the trichontahedron at the midpoints of each of its edges, this form would slide right in there, and I'll try to line it up good. Let's see if I could get it pretty good right at maybe there. Okay, well, you can see that golden rectangle kind of fits right on each of the diamond faces. So basically at the midpoint of each of the trichontahedron edges, this form would be in there. This form really eluded me for a while, till just a couple weeks ago, I guess, maybe a month ago, when it's brought itself to my attention. And I'll describe how I got to it shortly, and because it's got a really cool story of how it came to be, because I never thought of just going to the midpoints of the truncating a trichontahedron at the midpoints. It had to reveal itself first. So we'll talk about how it came to be. I found it to be a lot more simple to realize it was just that than the route I took, but the way I got there was cool. So this form here, it is called the small dodecahedron. And Coxeter and his cohort of great discoverers and geometers, they all figured this out, this form in the 20th century, probably in the 1950s or something like that. And Magnus Weninger, he built the form, and there's some models of it. I'm going to build it soon too. But what it is basically hexagon planes, hexagon faces. It's the same form, but I've kind of drawn a different version of the lines here to actually highlight the hexagon faces, right? So the thing I really liked about this is that it's a regular equilateral triangle in the middle with the hexagon around it. For those of you familiar with the cube octahedron, it's right now basically like a cube octahedron that you're looking at, right? But it really is part of a compound of 5 version. It's an icosahedral symmetry, but it's not a cube octahedron at all. But from a 2-dimensional perspective, you can look at just this portion of it and easily make that into a cube octahedron, just the center portion with a regular hexagon, equilateral triangle. It's all right in there in the original Seed of Life drawing. But these are big hexagon planes that are kind of crisscrossing one another, and they're kind of creating these little valleys that are like little channels connecting the kind of crotch of each star here. And I've created forms similar to this, but with the golden hexagon geometry, which is going to have a hexagon that are going to do the same thing. And that form, I'm not going to talk about much here, but that is the compound of 5 cube octahedra that does that, except it creates golden hexagon faces where this creates regular hexagon faces. And I'm not going to talk about the underlying forms in this. Maybe I'll do that in another video, but they're unique and different. All right, so from that same cool star pattern, I just want to point this out. We're looking at it as a solid here. And if I kind of focus on the center portion here and show the back of the form, like it's an aerial, see-through model, then all of a sudden, you get some cool designs and cool new geometry type of art patterns that can come out of this. And I love that rosette of tilted pentagon stars and pentagram stars in addition to the hexagram in the middle. And that's true to the actual geometry of the form that I was just showing. Right, so you can see the hexagon outline there and everything. And that's what I love about some of these sacred art designs, especially when they show some of the underlying patterns of forms that are in there that you would never know are actually connected to the geometry below it, to something that's structural or 3D or 4D or 5D. But so much of this geometric art following sacred geometry techniques is going to produce something that is related to form and structure, except many people don't really know that. They're just producing art, So that's a cool thing to know, that some of the designs you do may have real implications to the underlying geometric forms that they're connected to. Okay, well, now I'm going to switch gears again. We're kind of jumping around because there's a bunch of interrelated things, but this led me once again to take another look and go back and compare some distorted dodecahedron that is also in the Flower of Life in Metatron's cube, in the Ancient Secret of Flower of Life. This is not the Metatron's cube drawing, but it's the same dodecahedron. I'll show you in just a second that is in that pattern, but I'm just drawing it in the Flower of Life. And I wanted to compare it to this Flower of Life version here with that extended circle that gives us a new hexagon to work with those extended lines. So this is important to realize, that the proportions of these edges, if I have a hexagon that goes along the edge here, it's one of the defining characteristics to know if you're dealing with a dodecahedron that has golden proportions, is to look at this outer edge and see if this is golden proportion segment to the right and left side of it, okay? And that is going to be a golden proportion segment to either side. Now, if you're looking at this edge, and I did have if I had a hexagon here centered on the Flower of Life, top of the circles here, that would be 1/3 of this whole length here. So this is going to be golden proportion little segments. This is going to be little 1/3, or little thirds of a 1/3 of that whole length. So that's really a false representation of the form. And I call it false representation because it's really going to be a dead end in the rest of structural sacred geometry and how forms relate. There's nothing that's going to connect to anything else with this form. It's only ever going to cause confusion. If you like it for artistic representation, that's cool, but it's not going to be something that is going to give you a streamlined experience of how the forms interrelate from one another, especially from different perspectives. But the one on the right will do that 100% of the time. So just to show that the dodecahedron that I just showed you in the Flower of Life is a perfect representation of the one that's in Metatron's cube. So you don't really need, there's nothing really that you need to do with these lines. You could draw it in the Flower of Life and draw a lot less lines, because I only needed these additional lines to just pick up the meeting point here on the vertical lines to go ahead and give me that little dipping angle. Now, I'm not really promoting you to go, great, now we got an easier way to draw it, because now I don't have to draw the fruit of life and draw all these lines in to get that dodecahedron. But you know that that's still going to be produced and put on all sorts of t-shirts, because, I don't know, we love the 13 circles, and seeing that this form is kind of nested in all these lines, and it's like emerging out of the diagram like that. But I could show you a gazillion diagrams like that that actually do give you a dodecahedron with the same type of projecting lines. But if you know, just so you know, you can, because this is just dividing this into thirds. Again, this is just the same thirds. It's just like more well hidden, but it is just right in the flower of life. So you can get to the same false dodecahedron drawing in a variety of different ways. And this one's just showing it in the simple flower of life pattern. Now, I've laid them over top of one another because you really have to see this over and over again until maybe it'll really click, and you'll make, you know, the light bulb will go off of just how different these two really are, because sometimes when they're side by side, it may not make as much sense. But if you do put in the same diagram, one over top of the other, which I've done here, well, the black one has the edges lengths divided into thirds, and the red one, of course, has got the golden proportioned edges. Well, then we could see how much of a difference the overall shape, the proportions, I mean, they're going to share this central line, but everything is going to be more fuller, I guess, with the golden proportion one, where this one kind of just nose dives down into the middle, the black one there underneath the red one. So once again, we could get to the drawing there from the same template to compare both, and it is just a good visual reference. And I'll do this again in this diagram and show just another way to look at it. Is if you look at the central plane of the dodecahedron. Now, the dodecahedron is made of can be made of, or shown as being made of 5 cubes in a compound form in icosahedral symmetry. So you got 5 cubes rotated around like that, and each of those cubes are represented by one of these edges of the blue star here, right? That's why there are five edges on each of these faces, because one edge per face equals one part of one cube. Now, you could kind of see if I go down and go across here, that's one face of a cube, and there's another one down here. So that's an obvious kind of face of a cube that you could see. Now, I've shown this in other videos. When I follow these down and I go to the red, and this is not the best diagram to show this, but I'm showing something else, but you can see that these taper in. They're supposed to be a straight line, like parallel edges. That's good for a cube, kind of, unless you want one that is not parallel edges, and then it's not really so much of a good, you know, it's not so much of a cube anymore, more of a squished cube. But what I really wanted to highlight here was looking at a new way to look at this is, you know, inside forms, and I've shared this in some of my videos on the cosmic geometry, there are planes going through the forms, and they all have to maintain a certain symmetry to, you know, reach around to the backside of the form. So here we have this tilted pentagon, which is the same proportions, you know, as the upper pentagon here. You know, it's following the same rules of creating. It's just a smaller version of this. Is just a larger version, but that's going through the form and meeting on the backside. So we see 3 edges on the front here. These 2 red ones here, they could be dotted lines. They'd be going back into the form. But when I pull that out and look at it down here, we have a pentagon that has some golden proportions still embedded in it, even though it's tilted. Now, if I do that over here with the Metatron's cube dodecahedron, or this flower of life version of it, same thing, remember. This is super distorted, right? You could see even on the pentagon faces here, these pentagons in here, they're just not looking the same as the pentagons that contain them. So like this pentagon here at the bottom, look at this length of this pentagon when I make the star on there. This is a squished pentagon, the black one, and this is elongated. It's because they're not going to match. Like, this is going to be a perfect reflection of the pentagon that it's contained within. And if you draw another star within this, it's going to be a reflection of all those. That's fractality at its, that's how it's working. It's making holographic in its nature. The larger one contains the smaller at all these different scales, and the proportions are maintaining themselves. But with this distorted pentagon, you could see if I pull that out, well, that doesn't look like any of these pentagons. So every pentagon you get on this is gonna, that's not looking like the top pentagon, right? It's like totally pointed. So anyway, I'm just going over and over this again. And if you see my other videos, maybe I'm kind of beating a dead cube at this point, but a dead dodecahedron. But it's good to find, for me, to always see different ways to find different ways to point it out, because one of them may click for someone if there's any discussion or still trying to suss it out. So really, this is going to lead back to what is this outer shape of this dodecahedron that's divided into 1/3, right? Well, it's been masquerading the whole time, just like the icosahedron has been masquerading as an octahedron, in the Metatron's cube. So I call it the octa-icosa. That's the icosahedron in the Metatron's cube, and it's really an octahedron. Well, the outer shape of Metatron's cube dodeca is actually a truncated octahedron. Well, that makes sense. It's like basically the dodeca and icosa are basically in that version of it, Metatron's cube version. They're hijacking the edges of an octahedron and a truncated octahedron, and they're just really confusing sacred geometry, And it's really kind of a big issue, and that's why I've been overtly discussing and talking about this and creating like the Metatron's cube remastered class, to show a lot of variety of different ways that can make some corrections to that template, so that sacred geometry can move in a different direction than where it's been going, and really start to unlock its full potential of seeing interrelationships, not only in one viewpoint from this hexagon viewpoint, but seeing how this hexagon viewpoint is now aligned with the pentagon perspective and the square view perspective. And you really start to see the relationships from various perspectives. That seems important. So, but basically this slide is showing you, and I'll show a few more, that this edge and this edge are the same. And if I draw them around like this and I connect the inner lines in the way that is, like, let's just say natural, then you get your truncated octahedron. Thanks for freeing me. So let's go over to, look at so here it is in Metatron's cube, and I just want to show it again, just so you could see that these missing lines. Now, in Drunvalo's book, he made made it like a search of his, how to find the missing lines, which was how he got to it was with another student of his, figuring out that, well, if you connect these lines, you'll be able to draw the dodecahedron. Well, what I'm showing here is that really those missing lines are just a really been truncated octahedron all the whole time. And in fact, you have all the points, even in the same line diagram of Metatron's cube outline, to go ahead and show you how to pick up the square faces and to complete the central hexagon. It's all right there. Now, once again, you don't need to draw all that. In fact, it does kind of break the geometry, because it's going to sink that truncated octahedron down into the form a little bit, and I'll discuss that in a bit, because now it's not flush with the face of the cube. And it doesn't have to be, but it makes it a little easier to see how other forms relate to it. But I'll show you what I mean by that. But you can just draw it just with 19 circles, and I really love the truncated octahedron. In fact, I think it's little discussed at all in sacred geometry. It's an Archimedean solid, and it's really, I think, maybe has to do with the hijacked dodecahedron, always, saying that outer shape is, a dodecahedron, but the truncated octahedron is like the perfect pattern for the flower of life. I mean, a cube is good, but I don't have to draw any additional lines here. And of course, you don't have to if you do a regular small cube in here. But when I get onto the outer side points here, I'm just connecting dots, and all of a sudden I get the truncated octahedron. You should go and check out some of my previous videos on the doubling sequence pyramids, and I talk a lot about the truncated octahedron. But you can connect the pyramid that is like this pyramid here which follows a doubling sequence pattern straight into the center of the form. And you could see that in this pattern here, which is all the same size circle, I can continue to expand that circle pattern out. And as it grows out, I'm just going to be able to continue to draw larger and larger truncated octahedron. So in a way, this is a doubling sequence kind of fractal way of going about it without using golden ratio. It's just doubling sequence because each edge length here is going to be, the smallest one has an edge length of 1, and all these edges are the same, even if they're tilted here and they look shorter. The next larger one is going to have 2, and the next larger is going to be 4. And the next one is going to be, of course, 8. But I didn't draw that one because I got to draw a lot more circles to get out there. But basically all I'm doing is counting little vesicas as I go along. And each of those vesicas, there's only one vesica here that this crosses 2 vesicas, this crosses 4 vesicas, and so on. So the same circle template could do that. Now, then that's really all you need is just the circle template. And it's showing you it's not like static anymore. It does have some inward motion, and that's what these pyramids do and how they create that. And you could show that from square view and other drawings as well. But when you do it in Metatron's cube, and this is why it doesn't really make much sense to draw Metatron's cube and then draw a truncated octahedron in it. It seemed cool to do it when it was a dodecahedron because, wow, you're creating something in that line template and picking up this missing line. Well, that's great. I'll go through all that work to get the dodecahedron. But now that you realize, now that I've realized that it's just a broken, it's a false version of the dodecahedron, kind of broken. Well, then there's really no point to draw all those lines. And I'm sure as heck I'm not going to draw all the lines just to draw a truncated octahedron in here, which doesn't really proportionally fit well with the expansion of the forms in relationship to the cube. But I did want to take a look at it and just be like, well, now I can at least make some sense of the stellation in this, right? Because when it was a dodecahedron and that outline was a dodecahedron and you have those pentagon faces, the stellation pattern in that made 0 sense. I couldn't make any form from that. But at least with this, I have the template. I haven't cut it out yet to make this. This would still give you the 8 vertices of a cube as I go around here. So it's still contained in a cube, no doubt. It gives you the vertices. These stellate out to give you those vertices from this truncated octahedron. But it's not flush on the face. So if I look at it in a side perspective, you'll see that these are like hexagonal pyramids coming off this form. So here's the square face. So there's the square faces, the blue here. There's a kind of hexagon face. So picture that kind of shooting off and up to the left. And this is a cube. You're looking at it, outline of it could be like on edge view like this. So this would be the hexagon view. This would be edge view. So you're looking at it in edge view. And when it's sticking out to the side there, you're going to see that that slope comes back in here. Now it's makes so much more sense in a lot of ways that is flat across the top. And then you get a completely different structure in here that for the same truncated octahedron. Basically what I'm saying is truncated octahedron's a little bit bigger and would be flush with the top of this. And then it just makes more geometric sense than to have it kind of sunken down in. But that's what happens when you draw it at the missing line spot. But it is a real form that can be buildable now with these Metatron's cube lines kind of stellating out with a couple additional ones because you've got to pick up the rest of the hexagon. But it is primarily all the lines in the Metatron's cube to kind of do that stellation, which, like I said, didn't make any sense as a dodecahedron, but at least it kind of makes some sense now. Okay, so great. That's all I wanted to do on that portion. So we've covered the dodecahedron, false dodeca again, and showed some golden ratio stuff and just clearing up a few things there. And now I want to get into just a little more on that small icosahedron dodecahedron and how I found it, because it's actually what led me to figure out how to construct this circle template and with those extended lines, because like I said, it eluded me in a lot of other patterns because I just didn't have these lines in the pattern to pick up this small little pentagon at the top. So when I realized that this form was in, how I'm going to get to how I discovered it. When I realized that it was a form, then I had to, go back to the drawing board literally and start to come up with a circle pattern that's going to pick up these lines. And it turned out to be this flower of life pattern. In fact, you can just do it from the seed of life. You don't need these additional circles past the original 7, but it does make it look a little more complete. So we're about to get to the story of how I got to that, which is pretty cool, but I wanted to just show you that you can draw this same form from a few different views. And I'd probably say the sweetest of them is probably the pentagon perspective version of it. It's got the coolest circle template, or the smoothest circle template to pick up the line with the least amount of lines having to be drawn. Most of these icosahedral symmetry forms, when they rotate into like a compound of 5 or 6 type of thing, they often tend to be the easiest drawings are from that pentagon view. And when they go to a hexagon view or a square view, you're having to use additional lines to pick up points rather than just meeting at circle intersections. So this is a form I showed videos back. If you're new to this channel or seeing these videos, it will be totally new to you. So I'll have to describe what this is and what the 5 truncated octahedra, how they create the vertices of this. But that small icosahedron, I found it within inside of this form. So you're about to see how this form, which is the vertices of 5 truncated octahedron. Now that's the truncated octahedron I've been talking about. That's the one that the Metatron's cube missing lines was. So basically, if you take 5 of those forms and you rotate them into icosahedral symmetry, you're going to come up with a series of vertices on the outside of the form, which are going to give you these small little triangles and small little pentagons. It's not a form I've seen anywhere else. I don't know if anybody else has ever created this one. I have got to cut out the template for make this model too. But it is a form that exists within the real rules of how icosahedral symmetry works with the truncated octahedron. This is showing you the truncated octahedron with inside that form. So this is the same view. It's the same from the triangles at the top here. So I've just rotated it to the side here on the lower one to slide the truncated octahedron out, and you have this blue one. So this one is showing you a face view, and that's right in the middle. And this one is now showing you the other view of the truncated octahedron that's in the form that's also providing vertices to create the full structure. So you're going to have 2 of the truncated octahedron like this to pick up vertices, and then you're going to have an additional 3 of this style, and they're going to rotate in the form following icosahedral symmetry. And when you put them all together, 2 of these and 3 more of these rotated around at the precise locations, then all of a sudden you get those little pentagons and little triangles and the connections between all of them. Now, it's a lot more complex to look at all the crisscrossing of the lines underneath, but that is precisely how I picked up the other form, and that's what I'll show you in a sec. But I want to show the truncated octahedron, remember, is an octahedron, and but 5 of them. And when you compound 5 octahedra, what you get is the icosahedron. Now, that's a compound of 5 regular octahedron, which are, have 8 faces. You rotate those around once again in icosahedral symmetry. The vertices all rearranged to create pentagons and decagons and things like that. And then all of a sudden, you're going to get an icosahedron, which the icosahedron looks like this one over here, pentagon and triangle faces, 12 pentagons, 20 equilateral triangles. So we're just making panels between those vertices. But if you strip those panels away to kind of see the crisscrossing of the octahedra underneath, this is what it looks like. So what I did in this drawing here to kind of first get to this blue form, right, which is this compound of the 5 truncated ones. Well, here's one big octahedron triangle face. I've highlighted it in black, and you'll see in the midpoints between the two red dots, well, not midpoints, but 1/3 of the way, that's the truncated octahedron spot. So I have this whole edge divided into thirds. And whenever you divide a truncated octahedron or an octahedron into thirds, when you truncate each of these into thirds, then what you get is the truncated octahedron. You'll create hexagons and squares like that. But now all I have to do is do that for every one of those octahedrons. So I have to do every single one of these to figure out what am I gonna come up with when that's done. Well, you see, when I do just one of them, I've got a point right there at that pentagon, and I got a point right there at that triangle. I got a point at that pentagon, triangle point, pentagon point, triangle point. But now you have to do all these other ones, and then you get all these other vertices in the form, and then pull out the form, and then you have what I was showing you prior, and then I draw it from different perspectives and stuff like that. This way. So, okay, but I'm still not at, so this is still just leading up to how we got to this one that I showed you in the flower of life pattern before, the small icosahedron. Now, from that point, you have to now not look at the big planes of the form anymore. Now we really want to see how those square faces of the truncated octahedron, how are those interrelating? Are they crossing one another underneath all this, below the surface of the blue panels that I've drawn? And yes, they are. And this is what it looks like. So these are 5 of those square truncated octahedron face. I've kind of just highlighted and took it out of for a moment, just one little piece. And as those 5 faces of the truncated octahedron, as they crisscross one another, their edges divide each other into the golden proportion, and they're going to create the little triangle at the top. Now that, of course, is this little triangle right here, right? But below that, underneath the panels of the faces of the form, there's another meeting spot down here. And it's going to meet all the way around, and it's going to create golden rectangles, and this is starting to form a pentagon here, and that's going to create the form. So really the form that I showed you in the flower of life, the way I came to it was through this process of working back from the super complex form to find a cool meeting place, a golden point underneath the faces of that form. And then I just drew it up, and then I realized it was the small dodecahedron, because I had looked at it in Coxeter's and Weininger's book, Magnus Weininger's book, of all the polyhedra he constructed, because I looked at it when I created the golden hexagon version that was similar, and I compared it to this regular hexagon one. All right, but you can see the regular hexagon is going to be following these edges are going to be the same as if I go across here. So there's the hexagon, there's the triangle, and you could see that as like a cube octahedron. Like, I didn't draw it there. This diagram on the right, I'm going to explain to you in a second, but this is going to show how it's going to relate with the rhombic tricontahedron as another way to get to the form. And I think that's going to be easier to see on this slide. So once again, when we put the properly proportioned golden ratio forms nested within the cube, and this purple diamond shaped form is the rhombic tricontahedron tilted with inside the cube. And as we have those edges of so that we're just going to deal with the faces of the cube here, right? So I've got 3 faces, and I have a red dotted truncated octahedron. So remember, that's a non-golden ratio form, truncated octahedron. You got those square faces. Now, this is why it's important that they're flush, with the cube face here. So they're right on the cube face. And that's why, I said before that this form, even though I could do this kind of interesting stellation type off of with the Metatron's cube, see how this dips down here? Well, you're going to miss some things out. Maybe you'll create something else here, but you're going to miss this piece I'm talking about if that's what this is meant to be. I don't really know if this is meant to be like in the structure of geometry, like kind of naturally flowing with it, but it is there. I'll just figure out more about it. But when it is flush, this black square face right at the top here, that's going to intersect the purple rhombic tricontahedron face, which of course is the 30 diamond faces. And where those square in rhombus, where those edges cross, right, that's the midpoint of the rhombus. That's the midpoint of the edges of the rhombus. That creates the golden rectangles. So I only have 3 golden rectangles showing, and there'll be 3 more on the backside. So that's why you really need a rotation of this 5 times, so that every single one of those squares, are intersecting the tricontahedra, and that will then also produce the original form that I'm discussing, which is the one back here in the flower of life pattern, which is that small icosahedron. Now, I realize some of this material may be much more advanced than where I started off in all of this and worked through things, but that's okay. I know I have a lot of longtime viewers and apprentices out there that are continuing to work on seeing these relationships. So I've added this end piece in here to kind of really just start to see how things are rotating and how the different non-ratio and golden ratio forms are intersecting here to create the golden rectangles of the small icosahedron. All right, so there's just a lot of new possibilities, and here's one that just creates from that same golden, from the flower of life with that same outer circle, the square root of 5 plus 1 circle that I showed in the beginning. Without showing the whole flower of life, I've done a 12 pattern here, 13 circles in the middle, extended all those lines out, and then from there I could go ahead and divide the whole outer circle into 60, and if I draw a line between that, I could do 120. So just a lot of new possibilities. I love when a new circle template expands a greater range. And this is a very simple circle template to do, because really all it is one additional circle. I mean, there is a setup circle that we need to do to go ahead and get the magic circle on the outside here. But once I get that, then I'm showing you some of the variety of possibilities that can happen with a simple new discovery that is putting this at a proportion just beyond equal edges by only 0.236 beyond, that opens up a vast world of golden geometry and makes a lot of connections and relationships between many other structures that I've shared in other videos. And of course, this at the beginning, just to revisit, there's also a cool golden ratio discovery in relationship to the Zona Pellucida and the egg, the human egg, and how this same golden ratio is relating to giving you some close proportions to what we see in the biology of a human being, growth of a human being there. Okay, so thank you so much for watching. I didn't do a lot of model making for this one. I kind of was excited to just jump in and do the video. And I've got apprenticeships coming up, so go ahead and check those out over at New Geometry Courses. I mentioned the Metatron's Remastered class. Go ahead and join New Geometers. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video if you did enjoy it. I appreciate you watching the video, and I hope you'll be back for more. And maybe I'll see you sometime at a class. All right. Much love and appreciation. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.